We're going to open up the can of worms today, and I'm sure that will reflect in the comments down below. Love it or hate it, there is no denying that Glock has made a lasting impression on the market. They made a pretty big advancement in pistols, going from what at the time was primarily steel-framed revolvers and semi-automatic pistols to a polymer-based, extremely simple design pistol consisting of a smaller amount of parts, which just about anybody can learn to completely disassemble and reassemble in about 5 minutes with only a pin punch. Depending on how old you are, you may not know that they made that leap with the original Glock 17 in 1982. Well, that's quite some time ago now. But it seems to be they have been very slow to change or deviate much from the original design. Now, don't get me wrong. They've made changes, but not anything really groundbreaking. And that could be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. And even though I have a healthy respect for the Glock pistol, its durability, reliability, and I carried one for work in total for about 18 years, I'm also a bit mad at Glock because I think they could be so much better and do so much more right out of the box with a factory pistol. So if I had to pick 5 things that Glock could do to a factory modern Gen 5 or Generation 6 pistol, what would it be? And feel free to explore what you would change in the comments down below, because I'm sure it's definitely going to get spicy down there. And the first thing we are going to focus on is one of the major complaints with Glock, and that is going to be that fella right there, the factory Glock trigger. Does it work? Yes. Is it safe? Absolutely. But there are so many Glock trigger offerings out there, it's absolutely crazy. It's almost difficult to keep up with the amount of different triggers that are available for the Glock right now, because the aftermarket's parts section for the Glock out there in the world is probably larger than anything else besides the modern AR market. And there's a reason, because things could be a lot better. Take, for example, 2 that I personally know and trust that are going to be Overwatch Precision and Apex Tactical. Both of them have been amazing triggers. I've run a bunch of them. I know dozens of people that do. And both of those companies actually have law enforcement authorization letters from various different agencies, so officers can use their triggers. Well, that's saying a lot about the reliability of an aftermarket trigger, because when it comes to police agencies and sheriff's departments, they really hate change. In fact, in my opinion, most LE agencies hate change more than a fat kid hates a diet. But the factory Glock trigger just leaves a lot to be desired. The tactile feel isn't great. There's a lot of take up, a lot of mush before the break, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And I know that Glock now has their factory-like performance trigger, but honestly, I've tried it and it really wasn't that great for the additional cost. And for Glock, it would be very simple, because there are a few things they could do that would make the thing so much better, maintain all of the factory safeties that we know and love, but just give a better experience behind the pistol itself. The first thing I would say to do is just make that factory minus connector that we all kind of used to buy and put in Glocks anyways, the factory standard. Once you break it in, it's probably going to settle in about 4 to 4.5 pounds. And I think that's a very acceptable weight, even for a self-defense pistol. Next, just shorten up the travel a little bit. And that is super easy, because all that has to do with is how the trigger bar interfaces with the trigger shoe and the angle that that bar sits in there. By changing that just a little bit, you can take up a pretty good amount of slack out of that trigger. I'm not saying take all the slack out. I'm just saying take out enough to make it more like the Overwatch trigger, about a 20% reduction. And you're going to see a much nicer trigger response on these pistols. Again, nothing crazy, just make it a little bit better. That like 5 to 10%. And the last thing I'm going to say is the actual tactile feel of that trigger. It's just absolutely atrocious. Get rid of that curved trigger shoe. Get rid of that gnarly exposed trigger shoe safety. You could leave it slightly exposed for that insurance that you are depressing that to defeat that safety when it's time to pull the trigger. But it could just be so much better than it is. And there's also no doubt in my mind that Glock has all of these things already designed. They just haven't implemented them, because they've been very, very slow to change anything in any meanable way at this point. And I think those small, simple changes in there would make the thing so much better. And honestly, at that point, I don't think anybody could really argue that it wasn't, if not a really decent trigger, actually a really good trigger. Because let's be honest, if you need 2 miles of take up on that trigger before you're making the decision to break the shot, you probably shouldn't have your finger on the trigger at that point anyways, right? So I know some people like that take up for a secondary safety, but that's not what your trigger is. Your trigger isn't the final safety. Your finger is the final safety, along with your conscious decision to actually break the shot. And if you guys are interested in anything we're talking about or you see here today, I'm gonna have that parts list. It'll be the first link in the description down below. And for those of you kings out there casting this to the break room TV, I'll put the QR code for you up here. Also, if you guys are looking for eyes and ears for protection out there on the range, Check out the new Shell Shock stuff. I've been wearing that a bunch recently. Not only does their Ear Pro come with a really nice kind of gel pads already on them, it sounds pretty good, and their Eye Pro is ballistic rated, and they have those ones that change from clear eyes to the darker tone so you can wear them indoors or outdoors. They change automatically. That's pretty cool. So there's no need to change the lens out when you go from indoors to outdoor because they auto adjust. And next up is going to be the grip angles and the availability of the back straps. So in Gen 4 and Gen 5, you do have the ability to put on the custom back straps. You can get a little beaver tail on there. You can get a little bit more extra length for your trigger finger if you've got longer fingers and stuff. And that was good, but they missed the mark just a little bit, in my opinion, for those that don't like the Glock grip angle. So in my world, if I had my druthers, my decision, my preference, why not give a grip angle that you could put in there that more mirrors with a back strap the 1911? So Glocks have a 22-degree grip angle where the 1911 has an 18-degree grip angle. And people seem to really get weird about that little number. But at distance, I can tell you it's actually quite a big difference. So to give you an example, this is my natural grip angle. That's where my wrists and hands want to be. Now, if I go to line the sights, that's how far I have to wrench forward to get those sights aligned. Now, if you think about doing that, that puts a lot of tension and pressure through your wrists, your arms, your tendon, your bicep tendon. And if you look at really high-level competitive shooters, they shoot much more relaxed than most people. Their shoulders are low and down, their elbows are a little bent, they bring the pistol up, they're moving fast, they're shooting fast, because there's not all this additional tension of the shoulders coming up and locking out elbows and stuff. All of those things that used to be taught, and I'm so glad a lot of that stuff is gone, because there is, or can be, I guess, a better way, at least for me and a lot of other people out there. So if Glock would have done something where they could maintain that angle with certain back straps, but give you a less aggressive grip angle, I don't think there was anybody out there that could complain at that point that they didn't like the angle of the Glock. And again, this is something that Glock could do very easily, and I'm sure they probably have a design somewhere for it, they just haven't released it. And I know this is where some people are going to argue that having that locked forward angle just engages everything and allows you to shoot a little bit flatter. Well, I can run pistols with less aggressive grip angles just as fast, just as flat, and a little bit more comfortably. So yes, part of it does come down to the end user, but having that option is what really makes it king. Next up is going to be the slide serrations. So yes, they are there. They do exist on the front and the back, and yes, you can use them. But this goes back to some specific medical training that I did where we had to go from working a subject to actually engaging targets. And when your hands are gloved and they're covered in a slippery material like blood or anything else out there, or if it's inclement weather, getting a hold of these serrations is a little bit difficult, even when you have a really strong grip. And a lot of people found that out in this training. And this is one of those small things, those little things that would just make it like 5% better. And they could do it because there is plenty of meat on a Glock slide to get some deeper serrations, because there's plenty of meat on a Glock slide to do something like this with all that intricate work that gives you a lot more texture and grip to get a hold of. Now that may be a very small segment of the population that would need bigger serrations on the front and back like that, but if it can be done and it's an advantage, why not? Next up, and this is one that's going to get people going, is the actual MOS system, the modular optic system in there, which the plates are included. So that's a big positive from Glock. They give you the plates. But let's be honest, the Glock plates kind of suck, which is why there are so many aftermarket plates out there in the world that are just so much better than those cast plates on Glocks that I've personally broken a couple of over the years, which is why I go with what I think is the best optic mounting plate and system in the business right now, and that's going to be the one from Radian. Not only is it much better, tons of thread engagement as compared to like 0.2 threads or something on the MOS system. I mean, you barely get any thread engagement in there. And then the Guardian system up here protects your optic if you rack it off of something so you don't shear your optic off or shear the screws or break your glass, as long as it's a flat surface, right? And again, I love the fact that Glock includes the optics plates. I would just like to see an overall better optics mounting system, because let's just face it, optics are on pistols everywhere. The past decade, we've seen the emergence of optics on pistols like nothing else. The optics are the future, and the future is now, right? I mean, even large agencies are issuing optics on pistols now, and that says a lot, because again, LE agencies are extremely cheap most times, and they resist change like nothing you've ever seen. And last up is going to be a double undercut on the trigger guard right there. So look at all that thick trigger guard you got going on there, right? You could definitely do an undercut there. But one of the things Glock is known for is having that really low bore axis. So you can get your hand super high to the center of the bore line, which can help you control recoil. And people that are huge Glock heads love to just default to that on the forums. But I can run higher bore axis pistols just like a low bore axis Glock, and trust me, you can too, right? It's not that difficult. But the comfort of your hand and the ability to get a really good grip on a pistol is extremely important. So the ability to drive your hands up as high as possible on that pistol is going to help mitigate all that inertia and the action going back and forth, keep you flatter, keep you on target, and give you faster follow-up shots. It's also going to make your grip a little bit more comfortable because as you grip a pistol like this, you're usually going to be knuckle on knuckle, so there's room for movement. If you get that little extra space, you can fit your fingers in between knuckles a little bit easier, a little bit better, and have a more firm and solid grip. At least that's how I feel when I get a double undercut. And I've got a bunch of them. And there are so many companies doing grip modifications now, it's almost impossible to keep up with them. For example, if you take this one that was done by Shogun Customs, single finger groove, double undercut, and just that tiny bit of undercut right there just allows my hand to fit so much nicer on that pistol and get everything higher up in there, get more meat, maybe a little ledge out front. And that's all going to produce a better end shot, a tighter group, a faster follow-up, because if you can control this thing more while it's doing its job and you're doing your job, the experience is gonna be a lot better. Now, I don't think anything that I brought up today is like huge or life-altering. These are all small things, like those 5%, 10% better things that I really think could take Glock to the next level. Open up those angle options, double undercuts, a little bit of a better trigger, a little bit better serrations. These are small things that could be implemented in line, and implementing those changes would make it really difficult for anybody honestly to disagree with how good the Glock pistol could actually be all around, not just the reliability and the durability of it. Now, feel free to go absolutely chimpanzee poo-slinging crazy in the comments because I'm gonna be down on there with you. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. Make sure you check out that build list. That QR code will be up here. Remember, if you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready.